Today we're making a Braggot. Now, if you're curious what a Braggot is actually a mead and a beer combined, all in one. And this recipe is very simple.
Yeah, because we used dry malt extract, which made the beer making process less snap.
And then we added some honey to it, carbonated it up, and gonna taste it for you too. But let's get started on how we made it. We're gonna do this the easy way though, like we like to do things, and we're going to be using dry malt extract because it comes in a 1 pound package. I mean, look at this, this is like perfect. So really simple, we're gonna get started.
So what kind of dry malt extract are we using, Brian?
That's a very good question. This is Bryce, CBW Sparkling Amber.
At the end of this video, we'll give you full tasting notes so that way you'll know if this is the right combination for you.
The reason I chose the Sparkling Amber is because we're actually gonna be doing a couple of dry malt extract beers coming up, and the amber sounded interesting to me mixed with honey. So that's really the reason for it. 1 pound of that dry malt extract mixed with a gallon of water should equal about a pound of sugar. So like a 1.045, 1.046 final, or not final, original gravity. That's a good base point to start with for a beer. All in all, when we add the pound of honey in, this is probably gonna be like a 1.080-ish starting gravity, something like that. So this might actually, you know, have a little alcohol behind it too. Anyway. Let's start with some water, because the next thing we want to do is the boil. You don't really have to do a boil when you're using extract, but it helps to melt everything, and there's hops. Got to put your hops in there, and you got to get the bittering from the hops. We have done the raw ale method before, where you basically boil the hops separately, and that's a great way to go, except for one thing. You don't fully get the effect of the hops by doing it that way. I actually read about this. You have to have it in conjunction with the malt at that temperature to get the best out of the hops. There's actually isomerize, that's the word. Isomerization works best when it's mixed with the malt. So see that? I learned something. Everybody learned something.
So we have a full US gallon of water here, but we're only going to put part of our water in now, knowing that evaporation is going to occur so that we'll have less of our full volume, giving us room for that honey addition later.
Right. And since we don't actually have to boil the wort itself, we're basically using it just to mix it up and melt it, and we're going to use half that water later to help cool it down. Plus, it comes to a boil faster when there's less, and it cools down faster when there's less. This is not the easiest thing in the world to mix, I'll just tell you right now. It clumped up on me, it just made a mess. We're gonna use a whisk. I have a whisk, but before I can use it, it has to be sanitized. And just like everything else that we used here, it's gonna be sanitized in
The red bucket of sanitization!
literally a 10 to 15 gallon bucket that has Star San solution in it. That's all, it's just off screen. It's a little heavy and cumbersome to move around. Why a whisk, you ask? Well, it's whiskey business. It helps to break up the clumps. I think you're supposed to add the water first and then put the DME in. Yeah, I like to live dangerously.
A little bit of time addition.
Yeah, you know, rules, directions. I would actually like a little bit more water in here though.
Okay.
I'm just afraid the concentration might burn. It's gonna boil off too, so we'll probably end up adding more water anyway. So like a minute or two of diligent whisking and you can get it to be fine. It's all good. Okay, next, I'm gonna put this on the stove. Now, I know there are beer makers out there cringing right now because this is all wrong. The purpose of our show is not to show you, I'm gonna make this exact version of this exact beer using the most meticulous methods. It's to say, hey, we can make beer at home. And I consider Braggot to be a sort of a beer, sort of a mead. So I'm gonna be saying beer a lot throughout this video. Please don't get offended, but it is actually a Braggot. So we're using a pot. This is the same pot that we cook spaghetti in, okay? It really is. I'm gonna put this on the stove. I'm gonna bring it to a boil. When it gets to a boil, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do next.
So we have 3 cheesecloth bags with a handy dandy drawstring top that have been sanitized for your brewing pleasure.
Okay, so what we're gonna be doing with these is this is gonna be our hops additions. Now, I know in a lot of beers, they just throw them in and let them float around. Then you have to filter it afterwards. We're trying to do it this way. I've never actually done it this way, but hey, you know.
Will it work? We have no idea.
Yeah. We are gonna be using Tettnang hops. Why am I using Tettnang? First, because I know how to pronounce it, because people messed with my pronunciation of Willamette. You didn't like the way I said it? And second, because we actually got them for another beer that's upcoming, and we thought, hey, the aroma and the flavors seem to go with this as well. It's more like a subtle spicy with a little bit of floral and herbal. That goes well with honey, so we thought it actually might work for this. I'm gonna be doing 3 editions of 5 grams each. Really, really simple. I'm just gonna put each one into a bag on their own, separately. By the way, if you hear rain and thunder outside, yeah, there's a nasty storm going by.
We're actually currently under a tornado watch.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Good times.
And the way these work is when the wort comes to a boil, I'll drop the first bag in. That's the 60-minute part of the boil. After 30 minutes, I'll put the second one. And then when there's 5 minutes left, we'll put the third one and the honey.
Do you want these tied?
No, just tighten them down. It'll be fine. Be great.
Great.
So as you can see, it's up to a boil. I put the first addition of hops in there. We'll do another one at 30 minutes, and then when there's 5 minutes left, we'll put in the third. Okay, it's been boiling for an hour. At 60 minutes, we put in the first addition of hops. 30 minutes, we put in the second. 5 minutes left to go, we put in the third addition. Now I want to get them back out of there.
You can probably see the steam. It's still really hot.
Yeah, I don't want to squeeze the bag too much, but you know, want to get out some of our beer. I did add some more water during the boil because it was looking a little low.
It's really important when you're doing the boiling that you actually stay with it and watch it.
It'll boil over.
It'll boil over, regardless of how full your pitcher,
If you noticed an
vessel
awkward
is.
cut in the section where we were talking about adding the additions, it's because it started to boil over. These bags are reusable. They just need to be cleaned out. That was convenient. I like it. I don't know if it stops extraction or anything like that. I would doubt it because they're cheesecloth and, I mean, it was boiling, you know? Extra couple sips there, you know? Okay, because that's all your sugars. That's the stuff that you want in the must still. So now what I want to do is add our honey. Since this is hot already, the honey's going to melt together really, really quickly. So I have our scale. This scale goes to 50 pounds, so it can hold everything. We also have it on a hot plate, so we don't burn the scale. 1 pound of honey. For this, we're using Desert Creek raw and unfiltered Texas honey. Why? Well, it's a nice aroma of honey. It's kind of floral, so we actually really like it. And for something like this, it'll complement the hops. The hops complements this. It all works really nicely together. So I'm just gonna measure out 1 pound. Okay, so now that we have our pound of honey in there, I'm just gonna give it a mix. It should dissolve really fast.
Now, do you want the rest of the water in there at this time?
Yes, we can pour the rest of the water in now too. You know what though? Let's take it off the scale. Can you move that out, please? No need to be putting pressure on the scale. Now the idea here is we want to get up to a gallon. So we're going to put in the rest of the water. I used like half of half, so I used like a quart of water while it was boiling, and we just put in another quart or so, maybe a little bit more. But when we put this into a fermenter, we're going to make sure that we get up to the full gallon mark. Okay, looks like that's mixed thoroughly. So next, we have to chill this down. Here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to take this entire thing and put it in my bathtub and plug the drain and pour cold water into it. It'll take about 5 minutes, so we'll be back after that's done. We want to get this down to under 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's cooled. It was about 105 degrees a few minutes ago when I brought it in, but now comes the most dangerous part of the entire thing, and that is getting it from here into here. Here being the fermenter. That is a 1 gallon narrow mouth fermenter. I'm just gonna, I gotta stand up to do this. She smells pretty good. Okay, so now we have that much. I want to put water in there because we're looking to get to a gallon.
Yeah, we know our gallon mark is roughly here-ish.
There's some foam, which, you know,
not
just always happens.
All right.
Something like there. Now, beers are notorious for aggressive fermentation. So I'm expecting this to probably need a blow off. We may just start with the blow off right away.
Yeah.
We'll just do that. But first, I want to get a reading on our gravity. But before I do that, I actually want to take the temperature of the must, because that way I can make the adjustment to the calculation.
Oh, do you want to do a little? Well, it probably.
I'm gonna.
Agitated.
Yep, she's right. Breaks up some of the foam or makes more. Depends on how you want to look at it. 87.4. Hydrometer is calibrated to 60 degrees. We normally take readings at about 75, so I do want to make that slight adjustment. And handy dandy hydrometer, graduated cylinder. This is a non-graduated cylinder. It's a middle school cylinder because it doesn't have markings on it. This just gives us an idea of what the sugar level is, how much alcohol this could produce. That's what we're looking at. 1.078. If you take your hydrometer, if you have a triple scale, you can get an approximation of alcohol level by figuring that out. So if we go 1.078 and I just turn it, it looks like somewhere around 10%. So between carbonation and everything else, yeah, probably somewhere in that range. Smells of honey.
Yeah,
it actually smells really
does.
good. I'm not a huge Braggot fan, I have to be honest. I like beer, but I like dark beer. And I like mead, but I usually like sweeter mead. Braggots usually tend to be semi-dry and they're lighter, so they don't fit the wheelhouse that I tend to play in.
That being said, typically when we make a beer, we just make it and bottle it and it's done. This time, we're actually going to take a sample before we start to carbonate it, but we'll get to that later.
Yeast. Going to be using trusty Safeale SO4. Why? Well, because it's a great yeast for making ales, beers, and that sort of thing, and this still qualifies. It says 10% on the manufacturer's instructions, like 10% maximum, but we just did one recently that it went to like 13.5. So I don't trust any of that. It's more of a guideline. It's like the Pirates Code. So I don't need a whole package. I'm going to use just a half. Now, the reason I took a temperature was twofold. One, so I could make the adjustment to the hydrometer reading, which I'll do in a minute, but two, so that I know I'm not pitching my yeast into something that will kill them. Meaning over 120 degrees Fahrenheit, the yeast are going to die. They're not going to do well. So at 85 degrees, they'll be fine. Just eyeball half a packet. It's not that crucial, just as long as you have enough in there that you can build a colony. If I had to guess, that's probably about a teaspoon and a half or so. Let me show you my patented folding technique for yeast. Package has been cut across the top. See how expertly I cut that? Doesn't really matter. I was just joking. Take from this side to this side, fold it all the way across. Firm crease. Fold that side all the way across to that side. Again, firm crease. Now you have this peak, right? But everything is closed on all sides. Then you fold that over and firm crease if you still can. Then you tape that and stick it in the fridge. You can also do the freezer. Some people say that. I like to do the refrigerator. We've never had a problem. I mean, they last months, years even in the fridge, though they don't last that long anymore.
Now, granted, ours are in our mini fridges where we store our beverages.
It's a little colder.
So we don't have to worry about weird contamination, if that's even a thing. I don't know.
Not really. I can't imagine it is. That's why those packages are so thick. And
right.
everything. I can't imagine.
I just wouldn't store it next to, like, cut onions or something.
Yeah, maybe not. Would it make the onions taste yeasty, or would it make the yeast taste oniony?
I have no idea.
Hey, if you wanted to make onion wine, that might be the way to do it. Just osmosis. Anyway. Okay, so we said we are going to do a blow-off for this.
Yeah.
So to do a blow-off,
We need some stuff.
we
Let me
need
go
some
get
stuff.
that.
We'll go get it. So as promised, I'm going to adjust the hydrometer reading for the temperature. So if our temperature was 85.6, I think that's what it was, 85.6. It was something like that. And our calibration temperature is 60. That actually adjusted to 1.081. Now, I'm just curious because we usually take temperature readings at about 75 degrees. So what if I was to make my calibration say 75 degrees? That makes it 1.0795.
Pretty close to 1.078, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just going to call it 1.079 because this is a little bit warm. I'll go with that. I can't justify going all the way up because we never take readings at 60 degrees, and that would mean that I'd have to take the next one at 60 degrees. If that doesn't make any sense, let me explain what I mean. There is an adjustment to it, okay? But if you take all your readings at 60 degrees, then you're gonna get a consistent number from 60 degrees. If you take all your readings at 70 degrees, 75 degrees, or 80 degrees, you will always have that consistent margin of error, if you will. So because we always do it at 75 degrees, I just adjusted this to work at 75 degrees, and now we're fine. I can even go 1.080, just because I know somebody's gonna be irritated with me for not doing it. So I'm cutting the difference in half, okay? Adjusted. Because the odd number bothers me. 1.079, you can't read that on a hydrometer.
Okay.
I probably would have called that 1.080.
Okay.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So onto a blow-off tube. A little blow-off tube basically is a tube.
That blows off. It's supposed to prevent it from blowing off, is really what it does?
You put the other end into your
Stopper.
drilled stopper. You place that in, just like you would if you had an airlock on it. And then the other end is going to go into, in our case, a mason jar or any kind of vessel that will hold it. You want a good amount of liquid in there because we're brewing. We have Star San sanitizer right here. I just used that. But because it's such a large amount and it has such a different distance to travel, it isn't as necessary to use Star San in
Right,
here.
yeah, we use water in them a lot of the time. And I just put a piece of tape on it to hold it in place, kind of, so it doesn't flop around and fall out.
Yeah.
And I'm not happy with that. But this tape is just, I messed it all up.
I also didn't dry this, so.
I'm gonna get another piece of tape because I'm not feeling confident about the holding capability of the piece that I had on there. All right.
Now we're still going to set this in the tray.
Oh, yeah.
Because
It could still
go crazy nuts. You never know.
it could pop that sucker out of there,
Yeah.
and cats and dogs living together, mass
hysteria.
hysteria. We don't plan that; it just happens.
It just happens.
This is what we do though, like all the time.
It's kind of
Okay.
annoying. Sorry. So why are we doing this rather than just using an airlock, you may ask? Well, the reason being, this is so much easier to clean out than an airlock. Plus, it has a long way to travel before it's going to gunk something up and cause a really big problem.
We've
Where
seen
that
people that have-
airlock is condensed, and we've seen them get just shot up into the ceiling. Literally.
We've never had it happen, but I've seen pictures.
Yeah.
Because what happens is as that foam builds up, or if there's any solids or anything in there,
It can
it'll
clog it
clog
up.
the airlock, and then eventually it just shoots it out. We don't want that to happen. So the other thing is too, we've had a few people say that they couldn't get airlocks because of where they live or whatever, or they were extraordinarily expensive. I would imagine you can get a bung, tubing, and a mason jar. Or a glass. It doesn't matter, you know. The actual vessel that you put this in doesn't matter as long as it can stand and not fall over from the hose.
Yeah.
And there is an airlock. That is an airlock. You can use that through all of fermentation if you want to. Why don't we do that? It's a little more cumbersome. That's why it's just more difficult to move around. We end up taking things from the ferment station to the table and back and forth a lot. So if it's never going to move, you could totally just use this and be totally fine.
Yep.
Someone's going to ask how much water we used. Water to a gallon.
Yeah.
That's it. Water to a gallon because it evaporated, we filled it, evaporated, we filled it. Water to a gallon. Probably really close to 1.25 gallons, maybe even almost 1.5 gallons after the boiling, because boiling does take quite a bit of water out of there. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else you need to know at this point.
That's it. At
It's going to
this
sit for a
point.
week or two. It's going to ferment. You're going to see bubbles coming out.
You're going to see movement in here, probably. You're going to see stuff settling on the bottom. All of that is completely and totally natural and expected.
Eventually, after a few days, we'll probably put an airlock on here. And when that airlock activity goes to almost nothing or nothing, we'll be back to show you the next step. It's been 3 weeks on this. You know why?
Life
gets in the way. Actually, I had to make an emergency trip up north for a couple weeks. So now we're playing a little bit of catch up.
Just part of life.
Yeah, that is exactly. Anyway, this is probably done. So let's just find out. But we haven't even taken a first reading on it yet.
I
So
know.
we're gonna do that. We had these grand plans. Oh yeah, we're gonna bottle that today and get it all done. Well, not likely.
So, because this is a beer, it likes to be extra goopy, and so we got some goop on the end here. That is completely normal, but I'm not going to just dump this into turbos like I normally do, because I don't want that goop in my sanitization fluid.
This has a gorgeous
Oh, that's a
color.
lovely
And
color.
it is wonderfully clear if we had already racked this once, I'd say we're ready to go on this, but I don't know. You know, we might try racking it, see how clear it comes out.
Okay.
Because if I can keep it relatively clean when we rack, oh, see, this might not even need much adjustment or anything, too.
Can I move this down so you can read it?
Yeah. I mean, it's not fermenting anymore. The airlock totally stopped, everything like that. Beer always leaves a little bit at the end. And this is 1.014.
That's perfectly fine.
Yup. I think we might rack this and see if we can move forward. If I can rack it nice and clean, then we can do it.
Question then, do you want to rack it to a pitcher?
Yeah, we have to for taste adjustments.
Right.
But first, I have to tell you how much alcohol we made using the calculator teacher said I would never have handy. It was literally right there. I even have a stand for it now.
Does.
It's
fancy.
just, it's right there. So anyway, to do that, because this is going to be a lower ABV, most likely below 8 or 9%, I'm going to use the standard 131.25 as opposed to my normal 135. That's the reason we use different numbers. Higher ABV, it's a little more accurate to use 135. So
That's because it's not a straight line. It's actually kind of
yeah.
wibbly wobbly.
So we started at 1.080. We ended at 1.014. We used 66 points of gravity. 0.066 times 131.25 gives us 8.66%. Now this is right on the cusp. I would probably rather use the 135 for this. 0.066 times 135, just to show you the difference. 8.9. It's only 0.3% different in the reading. I mean, it's not that different, but I'm still going to go with it. 8.9%. Now, in the end, we are going to carbonate this too, which is going to add like another 0.4 or so. So this is going to be like 9 to 9.5%, which is, you know, Braggot worthy. It's you can brag about your Braggot. Actually, yeah, we're going to rack this because there's just no way this isn't done.
All right, so I have to sanitize the pitcher, and I'll be right back.
Okay, I poured a little bit of a sample. Have not tasted it yet. I just wanted to have a little taste. And I'm going to pour the rest into our pitcher. We're using a pitcher so that we can measure everything and make adjustments if we need to, because we haven't tasted this yet. We don't know what it tastes like. I know it smells like a beer.
Are we tasting it now, or are we
Nope,
waiting?
we're going to wait. Oh, okay, sure. Wow, that's actually pretty good. It's got a nice richness of flavor. Mm-hmm. I think carbonated and cold, that's a winner. Wow, that's really good. All right, well, we're going to rack it to the pitcher, figure out how many bottles we need, and then we'll be right back with you. So to rack it, it's very, very simple. We use an auto siphon, as we always do, which is just, you know, this piece with a cane that goes inside it. I am leaving the cap on because there's a whole bunch of stuff in the bottom, and I'm trying to get as close as I can to the bottom without making too much of a mess so that we can actually move forward today. In a perfect world, if you had all the time in the world and you didn't just lose 2 weeks, you'd probably want to rack this, let it sit. But here's the thing, you're playing a little bit of a race with the yeast too. Like right now we're at 3 weeks with this yeast. Another week might be enough for it to go totally dormant and not carbonate. So you're playing that game there. So, you know, it's one of those things.
We have plans for that anyway.
Yeah, we're probably just going to use insurance yeast. So I'm just going to go about halfway down and get this started. The color on this is absolutely amazing.
There you go.
And we're racking. Be back in a few. Okay, we racked it. There's a little bit more waste here than I normally like. You know why? Our auto siphon, it's been a little iffy lately. Okay, I'll be honest. It was starting to put up some bubbles. Towards the end, it wasn't.
Yeah, and that's just because of the rubber gaskets. They eventually degrade.
This gasket right here.
It happens. Regardless, it happens.
So, you know what we're going to do with this guy? We're going to throw it away. Throw it in the garbage. We've had it for like 2 years, a year and a half, whatever. And instead, we're going to start using this brand new fancy schmancy one. It's the same thing, really, that we got from North Mountain Supply. Now, North Mountain Supply has been very good to us lately. They've been sending us a lot of stuff to test out and try. This one is actually from the Vintage Shop, is the brand. It seems incredibly similar to the one we were using.
That plunger looks a little heavy-dutier.
But that seal...
Don't force
do it.
You want it to be wet. That's another tip. You want it to be moist. Otherwise, it's not going to...
Now, I see a slight problem.
because it's a different design, we might actually have to read the instructions.
Yeah. Okay, the cap doesn't just go over the holes because it actually has little
It has ridges.
rails. So you could
For her pleasure.
put it. Okay. So much for being a family show.
We're teaching people how to make alcohol.
Yeah. Anyway, so this will now go into turbos.
I'm going to just take that away from him. I don't know what he's doing with that.
That auto siphon is designed for 1 gallon fermenters, so that's why we have that exact size siphon. You want to just put a length of hose on it, and you're good to go. By the way, if you want one of those, there's going to be a link in the description to the North Mountain version. This. Okay, so now we have all of our Braggot. We have all of our bottles. Everything has been sanitized. Did we do this? Did we do the jingle thing? I don't know. What has it been sanitized in?
Stuff. The right bucket of sanitization.
Wow, that was very Muppet-like.
It was very Muppet-like.
It really was.
I was channeling my Kermit, but I should be doing like
Yeah,
this.
yeah. You gotta like open your mouth. Okay, we're gonna mix in our carbonating sugar. Now, a lot of people like to use carbonation drops or whatever. They're all basically the same thing. It's all
sugar.
just sugar. I am going to pour out just a little bit of our Braggot into a sanitized Pyrex container, just about that much. Now, here's why. You can do it right in the pitcher. This is a little dark, it's a little harder to see, and I'm afraid we might have gotten a little more oxygen in there than I wanted, so I want to limit more oxygen getting into it. And we're using how much sugar to carbonate with?
42 grams.
Now, 42 is not only the answer to life, the universe, and everything, it's also 1.5 ounces. So it works out perfectly. You can use a little bit more or a little bit less. There are calculators online to help you figure that out. For our uses, we found that 42 is actually really, really effective. And I just want to mix this together until it's basically a Braggot simple syrup.
It's also an easy number for us to remember.
Yeah. We used to do 28, or one actual ounce. We found that that was a little on the weak side. It just really, it was very in the middle of the scale, whereas 42 is closer to the higher end, but not quite high end.
Yep, and if you watch our oak-topped cider video, you will see how beautifully carbonated that lovely 42 can get you.
This doesn't really work that well.
It was good in theory, but those 42 are just hanging on in there.
I've made simple syrups that were easier to do this, but I usually microwave those. I really don't want to microwave the Braggot.
So we're probably going to have to just dump that in here, but at least it's sort of...
It's semi-mixed.
Dissolved-ish, adjacent.
And I know somebody's out there laughing at us, making fun of us. But you know what? These are things that everyday people go through when they're making brews and stuff. And you know what? We make all the mistakes and all the trials and tribulations, so you don't have to. All right, whatever. I don't care anymore. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take this. I'm going to dump it into here carefully. We might have reached like the saturation point.
And then you probably want to put some of that back into there.
Well, this was all sanitized.
Right.
But my hand was on the outside of it. All right, now I got to mix this through because there was some leavings at the bottom.
Yeah. We need all 42.
Yeah, we paid for those 42 grams. They need to fulfill their destiny.
That's better.
I think I got it all. To mix this up, we're going to use our brand new spattle. That's right, it's a spoon, it's a paddle, it's both. And it can be yours too from North Mountain Supply. That sounded so commercial, I am so sorry, but they did send us this thing. I mean, look at this, it's a little spoon and a hole to hang it.
I believe the reason why the spoon is so tiny is I think that actually fits in a standard 1 gallon carboy.
Oh, I never even thought of that. I figured it was to measure and then measure, and then you just flip it over and mix. Measure and mix. But anyway, there'll be a link to this in the description. This is its virgin voyage.
Debut.
So far, I like it. You can hold it at a slight angle and still get it into the sides. That's nice, actually. See?
Yeah, it has
because most of them are very square. It has
yeah,
the
this one's got the tapered end.
See, it's little things that make all the difference sometimes. And a paddle versus a spoon actually works better for this because I can just kind of flow back and forth without oxidizing, but it's all being agitated underneath the liquid surface. That's kind of important.
Yep.
And I think all that excess sugar just mixed right in, just like that. So.
Just need the extra volume.
All right.
Bellissimo.
Now, we're going to bottle. Bottling is racking, except for one little thing. We add a bottling wand, and it's It's a piece of plastic with a springy thingy on the end, also known as a stem valve, kind of like in your car tire.
So you just attach
Attach it to the end of the auto siphon, put that in your bottle, push down, start the siphon. You know how this works. We actually have a video on bottling if you need to see that, but we're just gonna do it and be back in a couple minutes. Okay, so we bottled. We ended up getting 4 16-ounce bottles, a 12-ounce bottle, and this curious bottle here on the end. This is a plastic beer bottle, and I put on it a stem cap like you would use for kegs. There's a good reason, but before I get to that, there was just a tiny little bit left over. You know, that's really good. I think this is going to be nice. Anyway, so here's what we're going to do. This is technically dry, okay? There's a little bit of non-fermentable sugars in beer and malt, so that's why it was 1.014. But we just added 42 grams of sugar to it, so it's going to carbonate. But do we know if it's actually going to carbonate?
We do not.
We don't.
But we have something in our back pocket called insurance yeast.
Right. Now, there's 2 ways we could do this. We can do insurance yeast and do the technique that I was going to talk about, or just do the technique I was going to talk about and then do insurance yeast if it doesn't work.
Oh.
So
That's true. We have technology on our
I'd
side.
rather not take the risk, but we are still going to do the technique. So the first thing we're going to do is insurance yeast. And what is insurance yeast? It's literally just a little bit of yeast added to every bottle.
Because that way we know it's active.
Right. You don't want to build a colony. You just want it to chew up a little bit of sugar.
Yeah.
And when I say a little bit, I have here a partial packet of EC1118. This is like my insurance yeast packet because I can feel it. It's not even a half packet anymore. And what I mean is we're just going to literally just a few grains of yeast. I can almost count them. Yep, just like barely any. And the reason is because we don't want to build a colony, like I said. We just want a little bit in there just to ferment.
Because natural carbonation is just a mini controlled fermentation.
Now, the idea with this is because we didn't add more than we need for carbonation, we only have enough sugars to carbonate. It won't actually go further than that. This one got a little bit less. The amount of yeast doesn't actually matter as long as there's just enough to get there. But
You don't want to put a stupid amount in there because that's going to make
mess.
more of a mess at the bottom.
But the plastic bottle, let me explain what that is for. We actually did a video on this where we can test how much carbonation there is. So this way, instead of popping one of these open and losing potential carbonation, we're going to put this little device on. Now this device just clamps on like you would on a keg, like that. And it has on it a pressure regulator. It's actually how you would carbonate using the little CO2 tanks. But this pressure regulator goes to 60 psi. I know when it hits between 25 and 30, it's carbonated. So that way, is it going to take a week? It's going to take 2 weeks? It's going to take 3 weeks?
We know because we'll have the information right at our fingertips.
Exactly. Now this is a plastic bottle. Highly, 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 highly unlikely to actually explode, so this can sit out so we can see it. These other ones are going to go into what we call the bomb shelter, which is really just a big plastic tote from Lowe's. And after this shows 25 to 30 psi, we'll be back to taste test it for you. So we bottled this about 3 weeks ago, and we used my little carbonation thing. And okay, I have a confession to make. While we were getting set up, I looked at it and I was like, oh, I wonder if I could release some of the pressure. Well, now the gauge shows 0. It was up to like 30-something psi, so I know, I mean, this is hard as a rock, okay?
And as you saw by the pour, this has super carbonation.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
reason why it is as flat-headed as it is now is because I actually poured these quite a while ago. We've been doing stuff and
There's a lot of
re-editing
recording to go on
yeah,
these things, you know?
So the fact that it has any head left at all is actually quite impressive.
But I think at this point I can do this. I can remove, yeah, look at that. See, take this thing off. Now I can apply this to the next bottle. I can also take this off and put a regular cap on if I want to. I will lose some carbonation if I do that, but you can certainly do that if you want to. I think there's plenty of carbonation in there.
Yeah.
But that means you only need one of these. You just need a few of those caps, and that way you can just keep using it over and over again.
I think we mentioned it before, but just in case I'm going to mention it again, the carbonating in a plastic carbonation holding vessel and giving it the squeeze test.
Really isn't effective.
No, because we did that when we knew, because we had the gauge on there, that it really wasn't fully carbonated, and it felt really stiff.
Yeah, yeah.
It's as hard as a rock now, but I would certainly hope so, right?
Also, too, we didn't do that for any reason other than just to monitor carbonation. That's how we knew it was ready after 3 weeks, because if we just pulled it at 1 week, it actually wasn't there.
Nope.
2 weeks wasn't quite. 3 weeks, it had stopped going up.
Speaking of beautiful, this is a lovely beverage.
Yeah, it is.
It looks like a really, like a dark ale or even a red ale.
I want to show what it looks like inside. I mean, you know, when you look at that glass, it's nice amber colored. There's still a little bit of foam on top, and you can still see the little tiny bubbles coming up. I mean, you know, it just looks so awesome.
It's a thing of beauty.
Absolutely. So, on the smell, it's very beer.
Very beer.
A little bit of honey. Almost like a bochet honey. That's kind of what I'm getting. Kind of like caramel.
All right, let's get in there.
Yeah, I'm tasting it. You know, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. It's beer with a little bit of honey to it.
I remember not really being excited by Braggots before.
We made a Braggot once years ago, and we did not like it. It was not. This is nice. It actually comes across like almost a dark beer for me. Like it's got a roasty note, good malty flavor. I don't know how the honey did that.
I wonder if the original beer base wasn't a dark malt.
I don't know. We'd have to go back and check.
We would.
I might put a little note here to tell you.
We're both fans of the dark malts.
It doesn't look like it. Well, you know, it does kind of look like it could have been a dark malt. Did I make a dark malt Braggot? Oh, that's awesome. A Braggot stout. I don't think we did. I don't think that's what it is.
It should say on that piece of paper you got over there.
Sparkling amber. So it's kind of in between. It's not really dark. It's not really light.
Okay.
Now I want to make a stout Braggot.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to do that. Chocolate stout Braggot.
Oh, we could use the meadow foam.
We can't.
We can get more meadow foam and use the meadow foam.
Sure. We started a meadow foam mead, and we don't have much honey left.
It's crazy good.
Oh my God.
At least on the aroma and the initial taste of the honey. We don't
Smells
know.
just like marshmallows.
We don't know how the mead tastes because we're still making it.
This is our first tasting of the day.
More, please.
I think we're just going to finish this guy off. This is 9.4%.
It's just gorgeous.
Whoop. Yeah, I'm pouring pretty carefully, and it's still foaming up. That's impressive.
Yeah. That's what
42 grams
when I was
of sugar seems to be the way to
when I
go.
was doing the pour for the pour cam. I'm like, okay, I know
We did it twice.
I should be holding the glass and tilting it, and that will cause less.
I'm going to show you guys the first pour cam that we did right here. Notice most of the glass was filled up. That was actually Derica's
That
glass
was
at the end.
mine,
So
yeah.
it did work out. It just totally foamed up like crazy.
Wasn't
This is
photogenic.
nice. And I love these glasses. For tasting wines and ciders, or not wines, beers and ciders, these are fantastic glasses.
These are.
We'll have a link to them in the description, by the way, if you want to get your own. They're from North Mountain Supply.
Yeah, there's something about having the correct glassware. And I remember when I was young, before I really got into drinking alcohol,
still
because, oh, thank you.
You'll be 23 next year.
I always was confused. It was like, why does there have to be so many glasses?
I still don't know the difference for
Why?
wines, like what glass for what wine. I still don't know that. I know champagne flute, and then everything else is just a round glass. I don't know.
But now I'm starting to understand why.
Yep.
Because it is a different experience.
So let's talk about what we're experiencing with this. I mean, I said a little bit of roasty, malty. It tastes darker than it actually probably is. I think the honey has added just enough to it.
The carbonation and the honey, I think, together are giving me a lovely mouthfeel.
Yeah.
It feels like almost creamy. It reminds me texturally of like the nitros.
I don't know that it's a little rougher than that.
They're tiny bubbles. They're tiny bubbles. For natural carbonation,
Yeah, it's not bad.
they're tiny
Now,
bubbles.
I want to point something out. We started with a 1.078 temp adjusted to 1.080 starting gravity. Now, I know that honey should have added 35 points, which means we actually got a little bit more So we got like 45 points from the Sparkling Amber DME, which means from a very, very, very technical standpoint, this is not a mead, okay? I would still say it's a Braggot though. I don't think Braggot follows the same rules. I think it's just a combination of fermented honey and beer together.
That's my understanding.
We're really close to even on these, so I just wanted to be full disclosure and explain everything, because somebody will ask, and that's a fair question. I mean, to me, I don't get too caught up in the naming convention.
And I think part of that is the naming conventions and the subsets and sets. You know, what's the Venn diagram with all circles and stuff? So there's mead, which is the big circle. And then there's all the different combinations of what you can add to honey that are encased within that giant mead circle. Now, there's some places in the world that say, no, anything else is not mead.
Yep.
And
they call it honey wine and stuff like that.
They are certainly...
Everybody's entitled to their own way of doing
you.
things.
Entitled is the word I think is better, because I was going to say allowed. And I'm like, allowed is not the right word.
It just gets really confusing because here's the thing. I don't really care if we call it Steve, which, yes, Steve, we are going to make a mead named Steve.
It's on the list.
It really is. But the problem is when you're trying to explain that to... got the sediment.
You want to switch?
Nope.
All right. You don't like it, but...
Yep.
That's love, ladies and gentlemen. I'm drinking the sediment for Brian.
I was trying to not drink as much of it, too, so... I can't do the sediment thing.
Makes him not happy.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Got a bad experience with coffee.
back to what I was babbling about with mead is that the big subset of mead, or the big circle of mead, and then if you add fruit, then it's a melomel, and if you add apple specific, it's both a melomel, but
And a
also a sizer.
If you add blueberries, it's a melomel and a bilbomel.
And if you add mulberries, it's a melomel and a...
Morat.
Thank you. Grapes. There's all these things, right? So they're still in the big circle of mead, but they have their own special name and subcategories based on their components.
And if you go to a different country, they may not recognize one name, but they might recognize another. There's all sorts of ways to do it. Like, actually, in France, mead is called hydromel.
Right.
Even though that's a type of mead in most other places. So don't get caught up in the naming convention is basically my thing. Don't worry about that. Don't let the name prevent you from making something you like. I think that's the easiest way to say what I'm trying to say.
What I was trying to say in my endless babble, which is my way, I'm so sorry, is that Braggot is like over here. Like, here's our big circle, and Braggot is here, and then here's beer. And
I call it more of a beer thing.
Braggot's just kind of like floating in its own little existence. It's not really considered a mead, and it's not
really
truly considered a beer either.
But if I tasted this without any knowledge of it,
I would say it's a beer.
Yep. Did you put stuff on your lips?
I have yes. My lips get dry.
Well,
you can have this bag if you want.
I don't want to. Oh, you touched this one. It tastes sweeter. This is nice, though.
This is really nice.
Actually really good.
It is really nice.
As I'm going into it, I'm getting more of the floral notes from the honey coming through.
Yeah.
I really like the hops we use, the Tetnang hops on this.
Yeah.
It's an older style of hops. It's old world hops, as they say, or something like that. I don't think it adds as much of the citrusy, weird, grapefruity thing that I don't like.
Yeah.
It really makes this like have some, like, there's some punch to it. It's just, it's really...
And I think
it's good.
That is something that we're going to explore more as we get more into exploring the world of beer.
Yep.
And how we can incorporate that into with fruit notes and honey notes and other.
And we've started doing more beers. We actually have a few coming. Yep. And I think some of it's seasonal. You know, as summer starts coming, beer and ciders become a little bit more popular. So we're sort of doing that. We never really cared about the season because, I mean, we're in Florida. You know, our summer is 95 degrees. Our winter is 85 degrees. So does it really matter to us? I mean, it's this, you know. But to the rest of the world, it does. And a lot of people have been asking for beer recipes. For the longest time, we said, they never work on our channel. Well, I did some research and found out that they actually do.
Wrong.
People actually do watch our beer videos. So we're going to continue doing that. We're still going to be a mix of everything. But
speaking of being wrong, I'm going to admit that I was wrong. And I always had these preconceptions of certain categories of things, and that they all basically being the same and with minor variations. And so, unfortunately, my bad, I was putting the variations of hops into subtle adjustments to a flavor as compared to, say, yeast. Now, different yeast strains are going to add different flavors to whatever you're brewing, but it tends to be
Fairly
very subtle. Hops is not subtle.
No, hops is pretty
I don't know
powerful
why I put that in my head that the different strains of hops weren't going to be.
It's probably because in the very beginning when we started doing beer, I bought a big thing of Cascade hops and just said, this is what I'm going to use because that's what we have. So we didn't really explore that. And that's our fault. You know, you learn as you go. But we weren't big beer people. We weren't big beer drinkers. So I don't think we would have appreciated the difference at the time anyway.
But I think both of us, as a unit, are actually going more towards enjoying the different beer types.
Yeah.
We're still diehard.
Dark
If you put all the beers, we're going to grab the darkest one
It's
first.
black. I want it.
Absolutely.
And now I really want to make a dark stout.
We're starting
Braggot.
to expand our horizons and appreciate things for their own merits.
Can we make a barley wine Braggot?
I don't see why not.
Make it like 18%
That would be like
carbonated.
stupid Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez. Okay, if
Maybe even fortified
if that's something
with something.
if that's something you want to see happen, let us know in the comments and give
like
us some
that idea.
ideas of what you think should go
If
in
you have
that.
Braggot ideas that you want to see us do, let us know. But for now, we have to put.
We do.
We need numbers.
We need to get
Okay.
to the point.
But the first is going to be repeatability. Honestly, this was easy peasy.
yeah.
Nothing to it. Super simple
Dry
recipe.
malt extract, honey.
Yeah, it's a base
Hops.
recipe. Okay, you can do almost anything with this, but even as a base recipe, this is actually quite nice.
Lovely.
I'm not seeing any adjustments here. Like we didn't adjust for anything and it came out really nicely balanced. And that's the beer and mead thing working together, okay?
And the new magical 42 for the carbonation sugar
That was beautiful.
We've had so much success with that.
I'm giving this a 10 for repeatability.
Sure.
And because we used dry malt extract, which is actually like shelf stable for years, this is super easy. Anybody could do this. There's no reason, because all you have to do is mix stuff up really, and you have to boil the hops.
The dry
That was
malt
it.
extract isn't really expensive, is it?
No, it's cheap. It's cheap.
Cool.
Yeah. And I think that's something I really like is dry malt extract mixed with other things to enhance it, making a whole different, it's like a whole other ball game for making beverages. So anyway, you're going to see more dry malt extract.
It's almost like he's doing foreshadowing for you right now.
Kind of. On to personal taste and bias and what we think of it. And is it something you would reach for? Is it something you would want to drink? Our scores go 1 through 10. 11 is reserved for those things that are just amazing. 1 through like 4.5 is probably like, I don't know that I'd drink it. I'd probably just dump it out. 5 to say 7 is, this is good. This, I would drink this. If somebody handed this to me, I would say, wow, this is pretty good. 7.5 and up is varying degrees of great to amazing. So, based off of that, do you have a number?
I got me a number.
All right, I have a number too. 1, 2, 3, 9.
Motion detected at the front door.
Apparently there's someone at our front door. Probably a cat.
Probably cat.
I went with a 9. I'm a little higher than you, but I went with 9 because to me there's not much that I would do to make this better.
I think the reason why I went as low,
I mean, 8 is still great.
insert sarcasm heavily dripping here, as an 8, is because more often than not when I think, ooh, alcohol, I think wine.
Oh, yeah.
That's
or
where
a cocktail.
Or a cocktail.
You do a lot of fruity, sweet
I
cocktails.
do a lot of fruity, sweet cocktails.
I'm the one that goes for the malty roasted.
But if I just want pour a bottle into my glass, it's normally wine that I think
This
of.
is almost the strength of wine. It's 9.4.
But if there's certain dishes in particular that I'm like, I need a beer with this.
Brats and kraut.
And we've had those dishes recently, and we did not have a beer to pair with it. And
We did. We just couldn't have it yet
I was sad.
because we'd be cheating.
I was sad.
We do still have several more bottles of this stuff.
So now when we prepare those meals and I'm think, ooh, beer, I'm immediately going to be looking for the Braggot.
Yeah.
Not just because that's the only beer we have in the house right now, but because it's very nice.
It works as a beer really, really well.
Very nice.
It's like beer plus. That's the easiest way. It's beer plus. Because if you think mead, like if you've had a lot of mead and you try this, you're going to say, this tastes like a beer to me. Yes, it does. It tastes like a beer with a little bit of the honey aspects to it.
And I think in the world of Derica, a beer and coffee are like adjacent. They're okay. They're both good. They're fine. But if you put other flavors into them, then that elevates the experience for me. So with the addition of the honey, it's given me a little bit more excitement there. So if it had other flavors added to it, then I would probably elevate my score even higher, just because that's the kind of person I am.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't go 10 because to me it's a little basic. There's not huge complexity. There's not huge depth because we did just use a basic DME and a basic honey. We didn't add extra malts or anything like that to really enhance it. We didn't add any other flavors.
Yeah.
I think this is a great base that really could grow into a lot of things.
And I think that's why my brain immediately went to the Meadowfoam. Because we've been talking with our VIPs about our Meadowfoam, and they instantly are like, ooh, s'mores. And so
says
a
s'mores.
s'mores beer.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
That would be good. I would like that. And so that's where my brain is going.
But I think we're done with this now.
We are.
So, as always, guys, thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.